December 1975, Rochester, New York. A 24-year-old engineer sets a toaster-sized camera on the table and asks his bosses to watch. The camera works. It is the first digital camera ever built, and Kodak owns it outright. Kodak will patent it, shelve it, and spend the next 37 years being destroyed by it. This is the channel where we take apart the companies that built the modern world, down to the exact meeting where it went wrong. Subscribe. Part 1. The Man Who Sold the Button. George Eastman was a high school dropout, a bank clerk who hated his job. In 1878, he mixed photographic emulsions on his mother's kitchen table at night. By 1888, he had a camera anyone could use, and a sentence: "You press the button, we do the rest." Before Eastman, photography was a profession. It meant glass plates, portable darkrooms, and chemicals you mixed yourself. A single photograph was a project. Eastman's insight was not optical. Most people did not want to be photographers. They wanted the picture. So he built a machine to do the hard part, and sold the easy part to everyone else. The first Kodak camera cost $25 and came preloaded with 100 exposures. You shot the roll, mailed the entire camera back to Rochester, and Kodak returned your prints with the camera reloaded. The customer never touched a chemical. Eastman invented the name. Kodak meant nothing in any language. He wanted a word short, impossible to mispronounce, impossible to confuse. He started with K because he liked it. And underneath the slogan was the real machine. Kodak did not sell cameras to make money. It sold cameras to create film buyers. The camera was the entry fee, paid once. The film was the annuity, paid forever, bought again and again. In 1900, he took it to its logical end. The brownie cost $1, film cost 15 cents. It was marketed to children. It turned photography from a profession into a reflex. Look at the arithmetic. $1 camera, 15-cent film, roughly 70% gross margins on the film itself. Kodak had built a business where the product you bought was the cheapest thing you would ever buy from them. The money made Eastman one of the richest men in America, and he spent most of it giving it away. He funded universities, dental clinics for children across 2 continents, and music schools. He gave away roughly $100 million while he was still alive to see it spent. In 1932, sick with a spinal condition and unable to work the way he once had, Eastman put his affairs in order, wrote a short note, and shot himself. He was 77. The note was 1 line long. It is, in its way, the most Eastman sentence ever written. No sentiment, nothing left running that did not need to run. His company outlived him by 80 years. For 70 of them, that arithmetic on the kitchen table was the most reliable money in American industry. Part 2. The Yellow Box Empire. In 1935, Kodak released Kodachrome, and color stopped being an experiment. It was invented by 2 professional musicians who did chemistry as a hobby, and it stayed in production for 74 years. Rochester became a company town. Kodak Park was its own city inside a city, with its own fire department, its own railway, and its own power plant. At its height, Kodak employed 1 in every 6 working people in the region. It paid well. It paid a wage dividend most years, on top of salary. People bought houses on it, and quietly assumed their children would work there too. Its research division was one of the best funded in the country, and it was not decoration. Kodak scientists worked on emulsion chemistry, optics, and sensors, and the company built a patent portfolio deep enough that competitors spent decades walking around it. In 1954, the American government took Kodak to court over it. The company had bundled film processing into the price of the film itself, so buying Kodak film meant buying Kodak developing. The consent decree forced them to unbundle it. They were, legally, too dominant. Then Kodak did something no company has managed since. It took ownership of an emotion. A Kodak moment was not an advertisement. It was a phrase people used without thinking, about their own lives, for free, for decades. In July 1969, the photographs that came back from the surface of the moon came back on Kodak film. The company was no longer selling a product. It was the default medium of human memory. By 1976, the numbers stopped looking like a market and started looking like a law of physics. 90% of every roll of film sold in America. 85% of every camera. This was not leadership, it was gravity. But a 90% share of a market is not only a fortress, it is a hostage situation. Every dollar Kodak earned depended on the world continuing to want a physical strip of chemically treated plastic. That assumption had 11 years left. Part 3. The Thing in the Basement. Steve Sasson joined Kodak in 1973, straight out of engineering school. He was given a job nobody wanted, using a part nobody cared about. A new light sensor called a charge-coupled device. His brief was vague. Essentially, see if it is useful. So he built one out of scrap. A lens from a Super 8 movie camera, 16 nickel-cadmium batteries, a digital cassette recorder. It weighed 8 pounds, captured 10,000 pixels, and took 23 seconds to write a single black and white photograph onto tape. The demonstration was almost comic. Sasson would photograph a colleague, then everyone stood in silence for 23 seconds while the tape wrote. Then the image appeared on a television across the room. The executives asked reasonable questions. Why would anyone look at a photograph on a television? Who would store these? How would you show them to anybody? Sasson's answer was that it would take about 15 to 20 years to matter. He was almost exactly right. But the reaction he never forgot was not a question at all. It was a compliment and an instruction. They were not stupid. They were not blind. They understood exactly what they had just watched. And that is precisely the problem. The reckoning was still 37 years away. The story everyone tells is that Kodak missed digital. The documented record says the opposite, and honest history requires a flag here. Kodak did not miss it. Kodak invented it and patented it in 1978. In 1981, Sony announced the Mavica, an electronic camera that recorded to a disc. Kodak's leadership did not panic. They did something far more dangerous. They commissioned a study. The study was led by Vince Baraba, Kodak's head of market intelligence. Its conclusion was startlingly accurate. Digital would eventually replace film. It would take roughly 10 years to become a real threat. Kodak had a decade to prepare. They got the answer right. And then they spent that decade defending the thing the study told them was going to die. Part 4. The Margin Trap. So watch what Colby Chandler does with the runway. It is 1988. The study is 7 years old. The clock is nearly up. And Kodak spends $5.1 billion, not on sensors, not on digital, on sterling drug, an aspirin company. It did not work. Kodak broke sterling up and sold it off by 1994, taking billions in losses. The money that could have bought the entire digital future was spent and lost on painkillers. Here is the part left out. In 1991, Kodak shipped the DCS-100, the first professional digital SLR. 3 years later, it built the Apple QuickTake, one of the first consumer digital cameras sold. Apple's name was on the front. Kodak made it. So the failure was never technical. It was arithmetic. Every digital camera Kodak sold destroyed a film customer worth decades of revenue and replaced them with one sale at a fraction of the margin. Draw it as a decision tree and the tragedy becomes obvious. Defend film and you keep the margins and lose the decade. Push digital and you win the future by shooting your own profit engine. Every quarter, the safe branch was the profitable one. 1996 was the summit. $16 billion of revenue, 145,000 employees at the peak, a market value above $30 billion. Nobody in Rochester believed for 1 second that this was the top. That same year, Kodak launched Advantix. It was a new film format, and it had cost roughly $500 million to develop. It was brilliant engineering, aimed at a world that was about to stop existing. Film revenue peaked around 1999 and then fell off a cliff. Not a decline, a collapse. By 2003, Kodak publicly announced it would stop investing in film altogether. The annuity that had paid for everything since 1888 simply stopped. In 2005, the board hired Antonio Perez to save the company. He came from Hewlett-Packard, where he had run the printer division, and he brought the only idea he had ever seen work: sell the machine cheap and make the money on the ink. Read that again. The company, destroyed by its dependence on a consumable, hired a man whose plan was a new consumable. Kodak loved the razor blade model too much to imagine another. Here is the cruelest fact in the whole story. In 2005, Kodak sold more digital cameras in America than anyone else. Number one in the market, and it lost money on almost every single unit it shipped. Then, in 2007, the thing that actually killed the camera business arrived, and it was not a camera at all. Apple put a lens in a telephone. Within a few years, the best-selling camera on Earth was not sold by a camera company, and never had been. And 3 months after Kodak filed for bankruptcy, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion. Instagram had 13 employees. It did not manufacture anything. It sold no film, no cameras, no paper, and no ink. It just held the photographs. Hold those two numbers next to each other. 145,000 people at the peak, building the world's memory out of silver and plastic. 13 people, holding it in a database. Both companies were in the same business. The cost of that was not really paid in Manhattan. It was paid in Rochester. Kodak's local workforce fell from tens of thousands to a few thousand. Entire neighborhoods had been built on the assumption that this company could not fail. Winning the race, it turned out, was not the same thing as surviving it. Part 5. What the button left behind. On the 19th of January 2012, Eastman Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. 132 years after a bank clerk started mixing chemicals on his mother's kitchen table. To pay its creditors, Kodak sold its digital imaging patents. The portfolio it had once valued in the billions went to a consortium including Apple and Google for around $525 million. They bought Sasson's future at a discount. Kodak Park is mostly gone now, buildings demolished, land sold off, whole streets of it leased to other companies who make things that have nothing to do with photographs. Kodak still exists. It emerged from bankruptcy in 2013 as a small commercial printing and chemicals business. It still makes film in modest quantities for the people who still want it. The name on the building is the same, nothing else is. Steve Sasson stayed at Kodak for over 30 years. He was awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation for 2009. The President of the United States hung it around his neck the following year. For the invention, his own employer told him to keep quiet. You know the yellow box. You remember the weight of it in a drawer. You remember not knowing what you had taken until a week later, and the shoebox in the cupboard nobody ever sorted. You took maybe 24 pictures a year, and you meant every one. The toaster-sized camera still exists. 8 pounds of scrap parts, built by a young engineer who was told it was cute. The company that owned it is a small chemical business now. The thing in his hands is in every pocket on Earth. So Kodak did not die because it missed the future. It died because it saw the future clearly, measured it precisely, and found that the future had worse margins than the past. It was not blindness. It was arithmetic, done correctly, all the way to the end. Tell us in the comments, what was your first camera? And is there still a shoebox of prints in your house nobody has sorted? If you want the other side of this story, watch the Xerox film next. Same decade, same mistake, different building,